Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. Welcome to Nomad's Tales Studio. While listening to diverse podcasts from topics of paranormal incidents, cryptids, ghost stories, and science fiction. But recently, I have been digging into the topic of ancient astronauts. There is the program of Ancient Astronauts from the History Channel. Now, I have an open mind, but sometimes this program stretches the truth. Now, when they present alleged evidence of ancient aliens coming down to Earth, they help the ancient civilizations jump from alleged hunter-gatherer societies. The next level is advancement of civilizations miraculously appears. Cities are built, monumental structures are made. Now when they have the author Erich von Däniken, who during the 70s was publishing books regarding aliens coming to Earth and helping humanity advance in giant leaps and bounds. Erich von Däniken says that there was no way the Egyptians could have built the pyramids in the plateau of Gaza with primitive tools, which has proven that the Egyptians did build them. There are written records of voluntary groups building the pyramids. They even carved their names in the Pyramid of Khufu. Likewise, the pyramids in Mesoamerica and South America were built by the locals who lived in those areas. Not by aliens, as Erich von Däniken alleged, to put the icing on the cake. Von Däniken was caught with forged archaeological artifacts. The final nail on the coffin, he made statements that revealed he was a racist, making disparaging remarks of dark-skinned people and their intelligence compared to white men. What a way to go there, Eric! There are fringe elements of archaeology who still claim that the ancient structures were built with the aid of aliens from other worlds. But their opinions are their own. I will not pass judgment on them since I write science fiction stories regarding a world that existed at the time of the last ice age. Welcome to Nomad's Tales Studio. Today we continue the saga of the Paranormal Military Units Chapter 9 and 10. The never-ending fight against the unknown.
Title: Shadows of the Beyond. Chapter 9. The Gathering Storm. The Paranormal Unit's base buzzed with activity as reports of new anomalies flooded in. The collapse of the rift at the Arctic base had stabilized the immediate threat, but it hadn't stopped the spread of void energy. Across the globe, dormant rifts were awakening, each one threatening to unleash chaos. Alpha sat in the debriefing room, his arms crossed as Captain Whitlock paced before him. A holographic map displayed red zones spreading across the continents. "This isn't over," Whitlock said, her tongue clipped. "That obelisk wasn't the source, it was a warning. Something bigger is coming." Alpha nodded, his jaw tight. Spectre knew. "He's been trying to tell us this whole time." Whitlock frowned. "And now he's gone. Again." Alpha glanced at the map. "He's not gone. Not completely. He'll show up when we need him. The question is whether we'll be ready." The door slid open, and Rain entered with her Apex team in tow. She looked at the map, then at Whitlock. "We've got bigger problems. There's another anomaly larger than anything we've seen, and it's in an urban center." Whitlock stiffened. "Where?" "Tokyo," Rain said, her voice grim. "And this one's already active. A city under siege. The VTOL raced toward the anomaly, its engines roaring over the skyline of Tokyo. Below, the city was in chaos. A massive rift had opened in the heart of the urban sprawl, and creatures were pouring through, their forms twisted and alien. Buildings burned as the local military tried and failed to contain the incursion. Inside the VTOL, Alpha briefed his team. "This isn't just a containment mission," he said. "We're evacuating civilians and taking out anything that comes through that rift. Rain, Apex will lead the assault on the breach." Rain nodded. "And you?" "We'll secure the civilians and provide support," Alpha replied. Kame adjusted his explosives pack. "Sounds like a plan. Let's hope it survives first contact." As the VTOL descended, the roar of the battle grew louder. Explosions rocked the streets as void creatures clashed with tanks and helicopters. "Brace yourselves," Alpha shouted as the VTOL touched down. The battle begins the moment they hit the ground. Alpha's team split into action. Rios and Kane moved toward a nearby residential block, directing civilians to safety, while Alpha provided cover fire against the advancing creatures. Rain and Apex team charged toward the rift, their advanced weapons tearing through the hordes. "This is worse than the Arctic," Rain said through gritted teeth. "The rift's already stable. It's drawing energy from the city." Voss fired a precision shot, taking down a hulking void beast. "We need to shut it down fast, or Tokyo's gone." Alpha joined him at the breach, his rifle blazing. "Then we hit it with everything we've got." As the battle raged, the air grew colder, and the shadows around the rift deepened. The ground trembled, and a low guttural roar echoed through the city. Spectre returns from the darkness of the rift. A figure emerged, its form cloaked in shadow. For a moment, both teams froze, unsure of what they were seeing. Then Alpha's voice cut through the chaos. "Spectre." Spectre stepped forward, his glowing eyes scanning the battlefield. His shadowy form seemed more alien than before, as if the void had changed him. "Told you I'd be back," Spectre said, his voice calm despite the chaos. Rain raised her weapon. "He just walked out of the rift. How do we know he's not working with it?" Alpha stepped between them. "Because if he was, we'd already be dead." Spectre smirked. "Nice to see you too, Apex. Now, are we going to argue, or are we going to shut this thing down?" Into the heart of the rift, with Spectre leading the way, the combined teams pushed toward the rift. The creatures seemed to focus on him, their movements frantic as they tried to stop his advance. "They don't like you much," Alpha said, firing at a creature that lunged for Spectre. Spectre slashed through another beast, his shadow blade slicing effortlessly. The feelings mutual. As they reached the rift, Spectre stopped, his expression darkening. "This isn't just a breach," he said. "It's a gate. Something's trying to cross over." Rain's visor scanned the energy field. "What kind of something?" Before Spectre could answer, the rift surged, and a massive figure began to emerge. It was larger than anything they'd seen before, its form a towering mass of crystalline spines and void energy. Its presence was suffocating, its roar shaking the very air. Alpha raised his rifle. "That's the something, isn't it?" Spectre nodded grimly. "Meet the Void Warden." The Void Warden. The Void Warden towered over the battlefield, its tendrils lashing out with devastating force. Buildings crumbled as it advanced, its glowing eyes fixed on the rift. "We can't let it stabilize," Rain shouted. "If it fully crosses over, it's game over." Alpha barked orders to his team. "Kane, plant charges on the rift's anchors. Rios, find a way to disrupt its energy field." Spectre stepped forward, his shadow blades glowing with dark energy. "I'll keep it busy." "Alone?" Alpha said. Spectre turned, smirking. "What else is new?" The final stand as Spectre engaged the Void Warden. Alpha and Rain's teams worked frantically to secure the rift. Kane planted charges on the crystalline anchors surrounding the breach, while Rios hacked into the rift's energy field, trying to destabilize it. Spectre darted around the Warden, his movements a blur as he struck at its tendrils and joints. The creature roared, its massive limbs slamming into the ground with enough force to send shockwaves through the city. "Alpha!" Kane shouted. "Charges are set." "Rios?" Alpha called. "Almost there," she replied, her hands flying across her console. The Void Warden turned its attention to the teams at the rift, its glowing eyes narrowing. "Not today," Spectre growled, phasing onto the Warden's back. He drove his blades into its core, channeling his energy into a destabilizing strike. The Warden howled, its body flickering as the rift began to collapse. "Now," Rio shouted. Kane detonated the charges, and the rift imploded, pulling the Void Warden back into the void. The explosion sent a shockwave through the city, knocking everyone off their feet. Aftermath. As the dust settled, Alpha stood, surveying the ruined city. The rift was gone, and the creatures had vanished. Rain approached, her armor scorched but intact. "We stopped it, barely." Alpha nodded. "What's next?" Spectre stepped out of the shadows, his form flickering. "Next, we prepare. This was just a scout. The real fight's coming." Rain frowned. "How do you know?" Spectre's glowing eyes locked on hers. "Because I've seen it." "End of Chapter 9, you said. Chapter 10. ChatGPT said, title, Shadows of the Beyond. Chapter 10, The Voids. Reckoning. The Paranormal Unit's headquarters was silent, save for the low hum of the command centers. Monitors. Red dots littered the global map, marking the locations of rising anomalies. The Tokyo breach had been contained, but its effects rippled across the world. Captain Whitlock leaned over the central table, her expression grim as she addressed Alpha, Rain, and the remaining members of their teams. Spectre stood in the corner, his shadowy form barely discernible in the dim light. "This is the final stage," Whitlock said, gesturing to the map. "The anomalies aren't isolated anymore. They're converging. Something or someone is coordinating them." Alpha folded his arm. "What's the target?" Whitlock tapped the map, zooming in on the Atlantic Ocean. "Here, an uncharted island. Every major energy signature we've tracked points to it." Rain frowned. "That's ground zero." Spectre stepped forward, his voice low. "It's more than that. It's the Void Nexasa place where the barrier between worlds is weakest. If they take control of it, it's over." Whitlock nodded. "This is our last chance. We hit them here, or we lose everything." Assembling the strike force, the VTOL roared over the Atlantic, carrying the combined force of the Paranormal Unit and Apex team. Alpha sat across from Spectre, his expression unreadable as he cleaned his rifle. "You've been quiet," Alpha said, breaking the silence. Spectre smirked faintly. "Just thinking about the apocalypse. Nothing new." Alpha leaned forward. "You've seen what's waiting for us. What's the plan?" Spectre's smirk faded. "The Void Nexus isn't just a rift. It's a gateway. If they've stabilized it, we're walking into a war zone." He hesitated. "I can hold back the worst of it, but we'll need to destroy the Nexus completely. No half measures." Rain, seated nearby, crossed her arms. "And what happens to you if we do that?" Spectre shrugged, his form flickering. "I'm part of the shadows now. If the Nexus goes, so do I." Alpha's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. The island the strike force landed on the uncharted island under a sky that churned with unnatural clouds. The air was thick with the hum of void energy, and the ground trembled with every step. Ahead, the Nexus loomed on massive spire of shifting void energy, surrounded by an army of creatures. Smaller rifts floated around it, pouring reinforcements into the battlefield. "Rios," Alpha called. "Scan for weak points." Rios adjusted her visor. "The smaller rifts are stabilizing the main Nexus. We'll need to take them out first." Rain activated her blade. "Apex, with me." "Alpha, cover our flanks." Spectre drew his shadow blades, his gaze locked on the Nexus. "I'll keep their attention. You take down those rifts." Alpha nodded. "Let's end this." The first wave, the battle erupted with brutal intensity. Creatures surged toward the strike force, their numbers overwhelming, but the combined teams fought with precision and determination. Rain led Apex team in a coordinated assault, their advanced weapons tearing through the smaller rifts. Explosions rocked the battlefield as Kane set charges on key structures, collapsing void constructs with surgical efficiency. Alpha provided cover fire, his rifle cutting down anything that got too close to Rios as she worked to disrupt the Nexus's energy field. Spectre moved like a wraith, his shadowy form darting between enemies. His strikes were precise, each one destabilizing the void creatures before they could reach the team. "Rios," Alpha shouted. "What's the status?" "2 rifts down," Rios replied, her hands flying across her console. "1 more to go." The Void Lord emerges as the final rift collapsed. The Nexus pulsed violently, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. From its center, a massive figure began to emerge, Void Lord, its form towering and monstrous, radiating power. Spectre froze, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's here." The Void Lord's voice echoed across the battlefield, deep and resonant. "You cannot stop what has already begun. Your world will fall, and the Void will claim it." Alpha raised his weapon. "Not today." The Void Lord roared, summoning waves of creatures to its side. It raised a massive claw, slamming it into the ground and sending shockwaves that knocked the strike force off their feet. "Fall back," Rain ordered, her voice sharp. Spectre stepped forward, his shadow blades glowing with dark energy. "I'll hold it off. Finish the Nexus." Alpha grabbed his arm. "You don't have to do this alone." Spectre shook his head. "This is what I am now, Alpha. Let me do my part." The final assault, while Spectre engaged the Void Lord, the rest of the strike force focused on the Nexus. Rain and her team launched a coordinated assault, their weapons targeting the spire's energy anchors. Kane planted charges along the Nexus's base, his hands steady despite the chaos. Charges set. Rios worked furiously to destabilize the Nexus's energy field, her visor glowing as she accessed the spire's core systems. We're almost there. Spectre fought with everything he had, his movements a blur as he dodged the Void Lord's attacks. Each strike of his blade sent cracks through the creature's crystalline form, but it was relentless, its power growing with each moment. Alpha! Spectre shouted. Detonate the charges! Alpha hesitated. You'll be caught in the blast! Spectre smirked, his form flickering. I'm already gone, remember? Victory and loss with a heavy heart, Alpha gave the order. Kane, do it! Kane detonated the charges, and the Nexus erupted in a blinding explosion of light and shadow. The shockwave consumed the Void Lord, tearing its form apart as the Nexus collapsed. When the light faded, the battlefield was silent. The Nexus was gone, and the rifts had sealed. Alpha scanned the area, his heart sinking. Spectre was nowhere to be seen. The aftermath back at base, the strike force regrouped, battered but victorious. The anomalies had stopped, and the world was safe for now. Rain approached Alpha, her expression softening. He made the ultimate sacrifice. Alpha nodded, his voice quiet. He always said he was part of the shadows. Now he is. In the void, deep within the void, Spectre stood before the Shadow Lord. His form was stable, but his connection to the mortal world was severed. You have done well, my weapon, the Shadow Lord rumbled. But the void's enemies are endless. Your fight continues. Spectre smirked, his shadow blades appearing in his hands. Good. I wasn't done fighting anyway. The Shadow Lord's laughter echoed through the void as Spectre stepped forward, ready for whatever came next. End of Chapter 10.
As a special bonus, there will be 2 more chapters added on today.
Title: Shadows of the Beyond Chapter 11. Enter Team Romeo. The Paranormal Unit's base was quiet as the survivors of the Tokyo mission debriefed in the operations room. The match showed no new anomalies for the first time in weeks, but the tension in the air was palpable. Captain Whitlock stood at the head of the table, flanked by Alpha and Rain, while the remaining members of their teams listened intently. Whitlock's expression was unusually grim. The collapse of the Nexus bought us time, but it didn't stop the threat. The void isn't retreating, it's regrouping. Rain folded her arms. Then we go back in and finish the job. Alpha shook his head. We don't know where the next breach will open. We can't hit what we can't see. Whitlock cleared her throat. That's why I've called in another team. The room turned as the door hissed open. A group of operatives entered, their movements confident but silent. Each wore black tactical armor with blood-red accents, and their leader, a tall woman with cropped dark hair and piercing blue eyes, strode to the center of the room. Captain Juliet Vega, Whitlock said, gesturing to the woman. Leader of Team Romeo. First impressions, Alpha's brow furrowed as he studied the new arrivals. Team Romeo. I've heard of you. Special ops, high-risk missions, complete blackout secrecy. Vega nodded, her gaze unwavering. And we get results. Your operation in Tokyo was impressive but messy. We're here to clean things up. Kane muttered under his breath. Another Apex situation. Great. A man from Romeo, shorter but stocky, stepped forward, his thick gloves resting on his holstered weapons. You got a problem with that grunt? Kane stepped forward, but Alpha raised a hand to stop him. We're all on the same side here. What's Romeo bringing to the table, Vega? Vega glanced at Whitlock before answering. Intelligence. Your teams have been fighting blind. We've been tracking void activity for months, and we've identified patterns you missed. Rain arched an eyebrow. Patterns? Vega gestured to the holographic map, which shifted under her command. Several locations lit up in red, many of which hadn't been flagged before. The void doesn't just open rifts randomly, Vega explained. It's testing the limits of our defenses. These sites aren't breaches yet, but they're where the next moves will happen. Alpha leaned closer to the map. You sure about this? Vega smirked faintly. Let's just say Romeo doesn't deal in guesses. The mission Whitlock cleared her throat. We've got one confirmed site on this list showing increased activity, a remote facility in the Amazon. If it turns into another nexus, we'll be back where we started. Alpha turned to Vega. And you're suggesting we hit it preemptively? Exactly, Vega replied. Romeo will lead the strike. Your teams provide support. Rain bristled. Support? We've been doing this since day one. You think we're just going to take orders? Vega's icy gaze locked onto Rain. I think you'll do whatever it takes to win. Or is Apex too proud for teamwork? Rain stepped forward, her hand brushing her weapon, but Alpha cut her off. Enough. This isn't a contest. We work together, or we lose. Vega nodded, her smirk returning. Glad someone gets it. The Amazon facility, the journey to the Amazon was uneventful, but the tension inside the VTOL was palpable. Romeo's presence made the normally tight-knit strike teams uneasy. Their calm confidence felt like arrogance to some, especially Apex's squad. Kane glanced at Rios as they prepped their gear. You ever see people act like they already won the fight? Rios smirked. Maybe they know something we don't. Vega's voice cut through the hum of the engines. Quiet down. We're about to land. The VTOL touched down near the edge of a dense jungle. The team moved swiftly, their boots crunching against the damp soil as they approached the facility. The air was thick with humidity, and the sounds of distant wildlife were drowned out by the hum of void energy. Place looks abandoned, Kane said, scanning the perimeter. Vega signaled to her team. Romeo, fan out. Alpha, hold position until we secure the area. Rain stepped forward. We don't wait. We move together. Alpha sighed. Let it go, Rain. Let them do their thing. The first contact as Romeo moved into the facility, the jungle erupted with activity. Void creatures emerged from the shadows, their twisted forms blending with the dense vegetation. Contact! Vega shouted, firing her plasma rifle and dropping 2 creatures in quick succession. Alpha's team joined the fight, their weapons lighting up the jungle as they held back the swarm. Rain fought alongside them, her energy blade carving through the creatures with surgical precision. Vega's second-in-command, a wiry man named Bishop, barked orders to his squad. Flank left. Keep them off the strike team. Kane detonated a charge, clearing a path toward the facility's entrance. How's that for support? Not bad, Bishop admitted, smirking. Inside the facility, the teams regrouped inside the sprawling complex, its walls humming with void energy. The air was thick and oppressive, and the shadows seemed to shift unnaturally. Rio scanned the area with her visor. I'm picking up massive energy spikes below us. The nexus is forming. Vega nodded. Romeo, take point. Apex and Alpha, cover the exits. Alpha frowned. If it's a nexus, we need everyone in the fight. Vega's expression softened slightly. Trust me, we've got this. Reluctantly, Alpha gave the order to hold position as Romeo descended into the depths of the facility. The betrayal minutes passed, and the hum of void energy grew louder. Rain paced near the entrance, her unease clear. Something's not right, she said. Before Alpha could respond, a loud explosion shook the facility. Alarms blared as the void energy surged, and the shadows deepened unnaturally. Vega's voice crackled over the comms. Fall back to the extraction point. Now. Alpha's instincts screamed at him. What happened? Just move, Vega shouted. As the team fought their way out, Spectre appeared from the shadows, his form flickering. You brought Romeo here? He growled, his glowing eyes locking onto Alpha. Alpha stared at him. What's going on? Spectre's voice was low and dangerous. You trusted the wrong team. The Void isn't just a threat to us, it's a tool to them. Romeo's playing both sides. End of Chapter 11, Chapter 12. Title, Shadows of the Beyond, Chapter 12. Truth in the Shadows. The Paranormal Unit's extraction VTOL circled above the Amazon facility as chaos unfolded below. Explosions rocked the complex, and void energy surged through the air like a storm. Alpha's team fought their way through the dense jungle, pursued by swarms of creatures and the echoes of betrayal. Spectre moved at Alpha's side, his shadowy form flickering in and out of the darkness. "I warned you," he growled. Team Romeo wasn't here to stop the Nexus. They were here to control it. Alpha fired a burst into a void beast, lunging from the tree line, its crystalline form shattering. "Then why wait until now to tell me?" Spectre glanced at him, his glowing eyes narrowing. "Because I thought you'd figure it out before it was too late." "Not helpful," Alpha snapped, reloading his rifle. Romeo's betrayal, the team reached a clearing where Rios and Kane had set up a defensive perimeter. Rain and Apex team were already there, their weapons raised and their expressions furious. "What the hell just happened in there?" Rain demanded. Spectre stepped forward, his voice cold. Romeo set off the chain reaction. They didn't destroy the Nexus, they stabilized it. Kane's jaw dropped. "They what?" Rios adjusted her visor, her face pale. "He's right. The Nexus isn't collapsing, it's growing. Fast." Rain's energy blade flared to life. "Where's Vega?" As if summoned, the comms crackled to life, Vega's voice calm and calculated. "Stand down, Alpha. This fight isn't yours anymore." Alpha gritted his teeth. "Explain yourself, Vega." Vega's response was clipped. "The void is inevitable. Fighting it is a losing battle, but controlling it, that's the future. Romeo's mission is to ensure humanity's survival at any cost." Spectre snarled. "You're not controlling anything. The void doesn't serve, it consumes." Vega ignored him. "This isn't personal, Alpha. Stand down, and you'll be spared." Alpha glanced at his team, then raised his weapon. Not happening. The hunt begins. A roar erupted in the distance as the jungle trembled. The Nexus's power was spilling over, and creatures larger and deadlier than before emerged from the shadows. Rain pointed toward the facility. "We're not leaving until we shut that thing down." Spectre shook his head. "You don't get it. Vega has the Nexus now. She's going to use it to open more rifts. If we want to stop her, we need to take her out." Alpha nodded. "Then we hunt." Inside the Nexus, the team fought their way back to the facility, battling through waves of void creatures that had overrun the jungle. By the time they reached the main entrance, the air was thick with energy, and the walls hummed with power. Inside, the corridors were warped, twisting unnaturally as void energy seeped into the structure. The deeper they went, the more reality seemed to unravel. Kane planted charges along the walls as they moved. "If we don't make it out, at least we can bury this place." Rios worked to disable security systems, her hands shaking. "They've locked down the main Nexus chamber. I can get us in, but it'll take time." Rain turned to Alpha. "We hold here. Spectre, what are we walking into?" Spectre's voice was grim. "Vega isn't just stabilizing the Nexus, she's becoming part of it. If we don't stop her, she'll have the power to tear open rifts anywhere she wants." The final confrontation, the team breached the Nexus chamber, a massive cathedral-like space bathed in violet light. At its center stood the Nexus's spiraling spire of void energy, and at its base, Captain Juliet Vega. Her armor had been infused with void energy, and her eyes glowed with an unnatural light. "You shouldn't have come back," Vega said, her voice echoing with power. Alpha raised his rifle. "Step away from the Nexus, Vega. This ends now." Vega smirked, raising her hands. Tendrils of void energy erupted from the Nexus, forming into monstrous shapes. "No, Alpha. This is only the beginning." The room erupted into chaos. Rain and Apex team engaged the void creatures, their weapons lighting up the chamber as they fought to protect Rios and Kane. Alpha advanced toward Vega, his shots ricocheting off the shield of energy surrounding her. Spectre flanked her, his shadow blade slicing through the tendrils protecting her. "This isn't power, Vega," he snarled. "It's a leash." Vega's laughter echoed through the chamber. "And yet, it's more than you'll ever have, Spectre." Sacrifice and resolve as the battle raged, Rios managed to hack into the Nexus's core systems. "I can destabilize it, but we need more time." Kane nodded. "Time we don't have." "Alpha." Alpha glanced back at him, then at Spectre. "Can you hold her?" Spectre nodded, his form flickering. "Go. Finish it." Alpha charged toward the Nexus, covering Rios as she worked. Vega turned her attention to him, sending a blast of energy that knocked him off his feet. Rain leapt into action, her energy blade clashing against Vega's void-enhanced armor. "You're not walking out of here, Veda!" The Nexus collapses as Spectre struck the final blow against Vega's defenses. Rios finished her work. The Nexus began to collapse, its energy spiraling out of control. "Get out of here!" Rios shouted. Kane detonated the charges, and the entire facility began to crumble. The team raced for the exit, the ground shaking beneath their feet. Spectre stayed behind, his shadowy form facing Vega one last time. "You wanted power. Enjoy the void." Vega screamed as the Nexus consumed her, its energy imploding and taking her with it. Aftermath, the team emerged from the jungle as the facility collapsed in a blinding explosion. The Nexus was gone, and with it, the immediate threat of the void. Rain turned to Alpha, her expression somber. "It's over." Alpha nodded, his gaze distant. "For now." Spectre stepped out of the shadows, his form flickering. "The void doesn't stop. This was just one piece of the puzzle." Whitlock's voice crackled through the comms. "Team, we're picking up new activity across the globe. Report back immediately." Alpha looked at his team, his jaw set. "Then let's finish this." End of Chapter 12, you said.
Thanks for listening to this podcast. Have a good day. Nomad's Tales Studio out.